This week I'm talking to Amber Cummings of Mental Health Rebels, and she shares her story about mental health, addiction, and she is so vulnerable in her story. And just a disclaimer, she does talk about suicide and severe mental health issues. So this is a trigger warning for this episode that we will be discussing suicide and issues like addiction and severe depression, anxiety, all of the things. But yeah, Amber was just so beautiful in her ability to share this story, a story that is very deep and very dark. And the beauty of having moved through that and come to the space where she's at today, where she is guiding and helping others in this journey. Amber is a mental freedom evangelist who promotes that we can naturally be mentally and emotionally healthy without needing pharmaceutical drugs. She spent 22 years heavily medicating herself for bipolar, major depression, and severe anxiety. And finally, she declared these drugs aren't working and began looking for real healing. That journey led her to energy work practices like yoga, mantra chanting, meditation, and breath work. And she did a major mindset makeover and learned to heal her nervous system through daily practices. And eventually she was able to detox off her med cocktails and live mentally free. Now she no longer identifies as having any type of mental illness. She's a corporate world escapee who lives in Mexico City, where she leads curtains and makes magic for clients. Her mission is to promote that this is the type of healing that is possible, and mental health diagnoses or prescriptions is not a life sentence, and that we have the power to heal our bodies, minds, and souls, and that mental freedom is our birthright. And I love this so much. And we talk a lot about, patternings that we take on from our parents, labels that we take on from our parents, and we just take it on as our own, right? It's like if you are told something enough times, you just believe that that's true, right? Especially from a young age, that 0 to 7 window is really crucial in our development. And so when we're told that we are just a certain way, when we're told by a doctor that we trust that we have bipolar disease or we have depression or we have anxiety and we need to take these medications to survive, and of course, like I feel like there is a place for it, right? You can do this work and be on medication if that's what you need. But it's also doing the work, right, to come to a space where you can self-regulate and have all of these extra tools that will really help you align energetically and cleanse yourself, and working on your diet and all of these other pieces, involved, included as well, can really help you to move past that. So yeah, this is just a really vulnerable, really powerful conversation that I'm excited for you all to hear. And this week for me, so I'm about to be on day 3 of an ice storm that has literally shut down Dallas pretty much. So I did, so kids are going a little bit crazy. I'm just taking this time it's funny because I was literally having a conversation and I was just so enjoying over the last few months. I've specifically taken certain days during the week off for myself so that I can do things for my business, so that I can do things for myself. And it's really showed me the structure of what I want when I am fully working for myself. And so it's been really nice and really freeing. And I was like, I need more time for myself. And then this happened. So it's like I'm manifesting this time, although the kids are home. So it's a little bit harder to get things done. But it's just the fact of taking the time for myself, but also being in my house and not really being able to go outside is a little bit just noticing the chaos that is my house when my kids are home and throwing things, and just kind of trying to keep coming back to myself and centering and being like, it's okay. It's a day off for everybody. Let them make a mess of stuff and we will figure it out. Tomorrow, get back to routine. But then I also noticed, the not working out, because I have that set into a very specific routine. So it's being able to shift and flow with life and how it comes up. And, this week wasn't expected. So now tomorrow it's okay, now I've had 2 days to read and watch TV with them and, do all those things. And now tomorrow it's okay, I got to clean, I got to move my body. I got to get back to all the practices that I know keep me aligned and keep me centered and keep me present. Because the end of tonight, I found myself getting a little frustrated, and frustration is that, generator, not self-theme. And so, yeah, it's also really interesting. I've been really aligning and embodying and integrating so much of human design and astrology on a deeper level. And so I'm really excited to share some of that. I think next week episode is going to be a little bit about just finding your purpose and in human design and astrology. And it's not your purpose isn't this is what you're supposed to do, right? It's that energy. the energy of it and how you can apply it and how you can move through it and how you can decondition it and how you can begin that process of like asking yourself what you need and working through the shadows and coming into alignment with yourself so that you can show up in the way that you are designed to and all that stuff, right? Because it's been a really beautiful process. And I'm just like not focused so much on the textbook definitions of things, right? I'm coming into myself and trusting myself and working on, I'm part of a small group where it's like energetic and intuitive psychic development. And so I'm really honing those skills of like coming to myself in meditation. And it's like, what is the sessions that I've had over the past couple of weeks? I'm just like, I'm sitting with it. I'm sitting with the energy of what I'm seeing on the charts before I really dive into the information, right? And I'm downloading messages, and it's just a very like intuitive practice towards it. And it feels so good and so aligned and just like, yeah, really incredible. So it's just like lighting me up, and I'm feeling so excited for it and just like kind of getting into that deeper meditative practice that I've been craving, but yet was sort of resistant to, and I still sort of feel a little bit of resistance to it because it's like sitting for 30 minutes, like, my defined ajna is just like, nope, we're not doing it. Like we want to think. And so it's like having compassion for that side of myself. But then like I'm noticing for me doing active meditation practices where I'm visualizing my breath coming in and out, or like doing pranayamas, or, you know, pulling in energy up through my chakras, or going through my different layers, my fields, you know, my physical, emotional, mental, spiritual fields, layers, bodies, right? I kind of doing like a more active meditation because it allows me to connect in with myself. And then I feel like then after I've run my energy through that, it kind of allows me to come back to that stillness a little bit. So I feel like I'm ending in like more of a still and silent place. And then when I'm there, I'm now connecting to, like this week, I've been connecting to Jupiter, specifically to Jupiter. And the information I've been receiving is really beautiful. And it is a practice of getting out of the mind, because it's like, as I connect to these planets energetically, it's like I have all these keywords that I've learned from the books, right? Like Mars is aggression, war, sexuality, assertion, all these things. So it's like I'm trying to come to this neutral space where I know within myself is my meditative space where I'm connected to myself, and then being able to pull in the energy. Like when I tapped into Jupiter for the first time, I just saw this really bright light, and it was just like pulsating. It was really slow and really soft, but firm and strong. And it was pulsating. And it was like, as it was going out, it was expanding, right? As it was expanding, it was taking things in. And as it was contracting, it was also pulling things in. So it was like engulfing and then sucking in, and it's like it was like a breath, right? And so it was just a really beautiful experience. It was just felt like really, really rich and deep, and it felt like it held all this like ancient wisdom, right? It was like storing it for us until we're ready to receive it. And so it was like a really big key to our consciousness, and that's what I received. And you know, it's easy to like go look things up and then allow what external factors to make you doubt what's going on in your mind. And I'm making a point not to do that, because I want to be able to just like trust what's coming through for me, and trust and know that like my messages that I'm receiving are true for me, right? And that they can be shared and they will resonate with people, and all of the things, and maybe not even resonate with people, and being okay with that too, right? So anyway, it's just been a beautiful practice. The Self, which I launched back in, I think it was August or September. I am relaunching it now. It will begin February 15th. I'm going to put a sign up form below, and it's just to get more information. So you just put your email, your name, what you're looking for, and then your human design or your astrology information, your birth information, so I can pull your design. So it's sort of like to get on the list for the program. It begins February 15th. And then of course, like you will know if you're within that week, because now we're like 2 weeks away. But I'm really excited for that. And it's sort of, we go through intention settings and goal settings, and the whole purpose is to come to yourself, right? To come to that space where you trust you. And I don't ever want to tell people how they should be, right? It's finding it yourself, because you are so powerful. And when you can connect with your body, you know, we go through, you know, to understand like the things that we're putting in our body, understanding if it's working for us and if it's not, and then coming to that space, like your human design, like, does it feel right? Like tapping into that before you consume something, to really tap into like what you want and what you need. And we go through shadow work and human design, attachment theory, and it's a 7-week program. And then in the middle, we have like a week for integration, a Q&A, And all the information, there'll be weekly videos that will be dropped in the portal that will be a lifetime access and all the things. So I'm really excited for this program. Again, that little link is going to be down below, so you can sign up for the list on the list, and then I will email you information. And then I do one-on-one sessions, so we can do a single one-on-one session, which is, it's deeper than just human design. So it feels kind of weird for me now to say human design, but it's deeper than human design. But we can do a one-off one-on-one session, or a single session rather, or the HD attached, which is a 12-week program. All of the information is down in the show notes. I'm really excited for all these offerings, and it just feels so right and so aligned, and I'm so lit up by it. And just, yeah, the feedback and the feelings and the clients have been just so incredible lately. So I'm really excited to work with you. And yeah, again, all the information is down in the show notes, and I will move on to the episode now. So I thank you so much for listening wherever you are listening. Yeah, just, I appreciate you so much, so much. I literally journal every single morning. Like, I'm so grateful for the podcast, and I'm so grateful for you guys every single morning. Like, it just lights me up that I get to do this every single week. So I thank you so much. Welcome to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today, I have Amber Cummings, who has a pretty incredible story. She was on mental health medication for 22 years, healed herself, got herself off of these medications, and really just, yeah, I'm so fascinated by your story, because I think it's, something a lot of people are not educated about, right? We're handed a pill and we just think that is supposed to solve it. And when it doesn't, we think there's something wrong with us. And so I'm going to give you the floor now to just share your story, where you started, where you are now, and everything, pivot along the way that kind of got you here. And then we'll go from there.
Awesome. That sounds great. And please, if you have questions as I'm chatting and telling this story, just let me know. And I'm happy to stop and pause and dig into things. Every time I tell my story, it like comes out a little bit different. So, so when I was 12 years old, I had anorexia. I stopped eating, which actually is very common for children who live in super controlled families. I had a very controlling mother and father. I was raised in like a staunchly Christian home where there were a lot of no's, and I was always sort of trying to contort myself to fit into in this box and be accepted and be what my parents wanted me to be. And so it's not really surprising that I had problems, and I began acting out at the age of 12. But instead of being able to deal with those problems, I got sent to the psychiatrist, the psychologist, and I was told, you have inherited the family crazy. And up until that point, like, it wasn't something that had been spoken about in my family. And I remember very vividly, I started acting out, trying to get attention and like cry for help. And I remember my mother just weeping in my closet and saying, I had a chair in my closet. That's why I was in the closet. I had like this walk-in closet that I made into this sort of little cove. And she was just like, this was my worst nightmare. It was my worst nightmare that my children would also end up with mental health illness, because my mother had been horribly abused when she was a child. And her mother, my grandmother, was like a textbook case of bipolar. So I was diagnosed at 12 years old with bipolar disorder, anxiety, and depression. And, my mom had received some relief from antidepressants, and so she was just all on board for me taking them. And when I was a kid, like, if I had a bad day, my mom would hand me Klonopin like it was candy. And so I grew up like thinking that is the way that you deal with these problems. But I also had a really poor example from my family of how to be managing my own self. And as I've gotten older, like, it's been a huge journey to unpack these things. But like, my mom, because she was a victim of abuse, she had PTSD, and things would trigger her and she would freak out. And like, one day, you drop a glass of water on the floor and it was like, oh, it's no problem, it's just water. And then the next day it was like, oh my God, this is the end of the world, I can't handle anything else, go to your room, don't come out, right? And so I was always on hyper alert, I was hyper aware, I didn't know what was going to happen next, and I was trying to like be aware of my caretakers. And then I didn't know how to handle crisis like a normal person. Like when something happened with me, it was like, oh, well, you're supposed to stuff it down and act like everything's fine until you freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, getting that training and then going on and living in my adult life, like, I acted like a crazy person, but I had crazy person training. So I really lived out that destiny of like, you have severe mental health disorder. And I just believed that. For me, it was a life sentence. And I had an interesting life. I like lived in multiple countries. I lived in Spain for a while, and then I got married and had a marriage that fell apart. And I moved to Argentina and spent a few years there, and like all these adventures. But it was always just very tumultuous and chaotic. And I had really messy relationships, and I finally, when I moved to San Francisco, I was like late 20s, early 30s, was living in San Francisco and Oakland. That was when things got really bad. Like I started dating someone who also had his own, set of issues that he came in with, and it ended up, our crazies were really amplified. I think we really amplified one another in our dysfunction, and it ended up being like an emotionally abusive relationship. He drank a lot. I started drinking a lot. I became an alcoholic. Like I do not think in 2014, I don't think that there was a day that I didn't drink. Like, and I was sort of a functional alcoholic. Like I would drink like a bottle of wine every day, but I could still show up to work every day, And so I was kind of in this really dark spiral, and I was taking a whole cocktail of drugs, and like I was always going on and off trying to find the right mix. And it was never ever like, no one ever said to me, oh, Amber, like let's figure out how to get you permanently healthy. It was always like, how can we manage your mental health illness? Like that was the goal.
Like
And
there's never a cure.
No, there was never any suggestion that I could get cured. It was always like, we just have to manage you. And actually arriving at a place where I'd like accepted my mental health issues and was managing them, like that actually felt like an achievement for me at one point in time. So in like, gosh, 2014 to 2016, like it got really bad. There were days where I had to go out of work on mental health disability. I like could no longer really perform. I knelt in the street screaming. The police had to come and get me. I was hospitalized multiple times, and I ended up having 2 suicide attempts where I took tons and tons of pills. The first one I took like 3 bottles of pills, and then the second suicide attempt I took 4 bottles of pills. And in that second suicide attempt, I was completely unconscious for 48 hours. It's an absolute miracle that I woke up. I took like an entire bottle of Klonopin, and along with Vibrid and sleeping pills, and I can't even remember what the fourth one was. I think an antidepressant. And I remember doing it too, like I had been drinking, of course, and I spread all of the pills out on the ground and just like ate handfuls of pills and drank them down with wine. I was also a smoker at this point. Like my system was so toxic, and I was just in such a state. I have like really deep compassion for people who are experiencing like heavy duty psychotic episodes, because it's real. I mean, like when you're there that deep down, it's a dark, it just feels like a big dark abyss. After that suicide attempt, I woke up and I had a big cut on my eye. And I must have, like, I don't remember what happened, but I must have like gotten up at some point and fallen and hit my head and like probably had whiplash. And then I was laying unconscious for a long time, and I probably had serotonin syndrome. So I was like convulsing, and I hurt my shoulder somehow. Like my shoulder muscles stopped working together, and it was called scapular dyskinesia. It was a terrible injury. I pretty much lost the use of my shoulder for like probably about 9 months. And then about a month after that, I had a hip surgery. I'd been dealing with hip issues. And so between the surgery and my shoulder, I basically lost the use of the left side of my body for about 9 months. And that was my lowest of low points. And because I had hurt myself in the suicide, I was like, well, I can't keep trying to kill myself because I could end up permanently disabled. And I began reading statistics about suicides, and actually, taking pills is not very effective at all. Only like 11% of people who take pills to try and kill themselves succeed. And if you really want to kill yourself, I mean, the you have to like shoot yourself in the head. I mean, otherwise there's just a super high possibility that a suicide will be not successful and that you can be severely injured. And I didn't have a gun. I didn't know how to shoot a gun, and thankfully, like, I never did that, but I was very suicidal. Like, it was something that I was thinking about every single day, practically constantly. And I ended up in this place where I was like, I felt trapped in life. Like, how I can't kill myself, but I don't want to be here. And my mantra that I just was repeating in my head was like, if this is my life, I don't want to live. And it finally reached this point where I was like, I I just tried to kill myself twice on these meds. Like, they're obviously not working. I've been taking these meds for, like, at this point it had been like 18 years or something, and like, I'm not fixed. I just keep seeming to get worse and worse and worse. And I tried talking to my doctor about it. I was like, I don't think that it was Vibrit that I was taking. I don't think that the Vibrit's working for me. And he is like, well, we've tried so many things with you and you seem to tolerate it okay. Why don't you give it a little longer? And I was like, something is wrong here. And I also just had this feeling like, this is too unsustainable. Like, I cannot continue being this miserable. And so I actually tapered off of my antidepressant at that point and started trying to work with somebody to do like vitamin therapy, which ultimately wasn't successful. I went back on antidepressants like a few months later. But I think that was the shift where I got really disillusioned. Like, I started being like, there has to be something more. And it was when this searching began. And, those who seek shall find. And it was like something after that suicide attempt, something in me really did shift. I started trying to do things to just take care of myself. And I began this program called 30 Days to Thrive. It was a commitment to do yoga and meditation every single day for 30 days at a yoga studio. And this was January something 2017. And I had been doing yoga for years, but always I liked like the hardcore yoga. I've always liked to work out, which I actually think is one of the things that like has saved me through my life with all the other problems. At least I was going to the gym. Right?
I feel that.
Yeah. So I started this yoga program, and it was a commitment to do yoga and meditate for at least 5 minutes every day. And I had never meditated before. And because of all of my body problems, like, I was just starting to get the use of my body back, and I couldn't do heavy duty yoga. So I was going to these like super calm, relaxing, restorative yoga classes. And at the same time, I had found this old box of journals in my closet, and I decided to reread them. And I don't remember why I did that, but I had like 18 books that I had written through my whole life. And I was just appalled at my own self. Like, in all of these books, my internal voice was just like, Amber, you're worthless. I hate you. I wish I could escape you. I want to crawl out of my skin. You don't deserve to be alive. Like, over and over, just pages and pages of this talk. And I was like, wow, my whole life I've been talking to myself like this. And then that was contrasted with these yoga classes where I'd go and they'd be like talking about love and self-love and, compassion. And there was one day I was in this restorative yoga class, like curled up on the floor in the dark with my bolster. And the woman said, do you think that in this moment you could just give yourself a little compassion? And I lost it. I just began to weep. It was like that was the day that the message of self-love finally hit me in my heart. And I couldn't stop crying through the whole class. Trying to cry quietly. And then I get in my car and I'm sobbing. And I got home that day and I knelt in front of the mirror and I was like, Amber, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have hated you all of my life. I've been awful to you. I hated you so much that I tried to kill you. Like, this is unsustainable. Like, I'm the only person in my life. I was single. It was just me with this horrible voice inside of my head. Like, of course I wasn't thriving. And I made a commitment that day. I was like, I promise that from now on, I'm going to start being nice to you and take care of you. And Rochelle, that was the start of my healing journey. Like, that day changed my life, because if you're taking care of yourself, you can't stay up until 2 a.m. drinking bottles of wine and smoking on the couch. Like, it doesn't align. And if you're taking care of yourself, well, you can't be letting your job abuse you, and letting men abuse you, and letting, I think there's just so many behaviors that once I started being like, I'm being good to myself, I had to alter them. And I had felt like such a victim, that I was a victim of life and poor me. And I finally was just like, no, you know what? This is my life. It is really a big giant mess, but I'm going to start trying to do what I can with what I've got here. And I began doing little things that were kind of beautiful. Like, I started a Spanish language book club. And that was really amazing. I like to read a book in Spanish, people have to have a pretty high level of language. So everyone was expats. It was like people from Cuba and people from Spain and Argentina and Mexico. And like, I began having all of these really inspiring people coming into my life. And like, now I'm talking to you from Mexico City. I mean, that actually was part of the inspiration for me to eventually say, like, I'm out of here, I'm leaving. And I started getting like little by little better. Like 2017, I was just slowly gaining strength and starting to take care of myself. And I really had to deal with my alcoholism. I started trying to drink less. And in May of 2018, I decided, like, I just felt like I had been banging my head against a brick wall. Like, I had been trying and trying to make Oakland work for me. I was working in downtown SF and living in Oakland, and I had not had really success with relationships, like on a romantic nor a friendship level. And it was like everything in my life looked good on the outside. Like, I had a little commuter car, and I made enough money, and I, had my, good looking office job. I worked at a well-known, like, large company and blah, blah, blah. But it felt so empty. It was like, I felt like I wanted to live with more heart and soul and prioritize relationships and experiences above material things. So I tore down my whole life and sold everything. And that was really tough for me. Like, it wasn't a triumphant thing. Like, for me, it felt kind of like I failed. But I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I went to Bali for a yoga teacher training. And I don't know, it was probably not a great idea. Like, what I needed at that point in time was to rest, but instead I joined this intensive yoga teacher training where we were like doing intense yoga for 10 hours a day and then had homework on top of that. And I just crumbled. Like, I couldn't do it. I started having these crazy panic attacks in the morning, and I couldn't breathe. I was taking Wellbutrin at that point, and I actually feel like Wellbutrin really contributed to my panic attacks, because it's kind of an upper antidepressant. But I also started having like visions where I was seeing energy and lights and like goddesses and these crazy dreams. Like, I dreamt about someone that I had dated years before and wrote him a message on Facebook, I think, at that time. And he was there in Bali, like 2 blocks away from me. And it was just like really weird things started happening. But I ended up dropping out of that yoga teacher training. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I spent like 2 weeks just crying alone in the jungle, and that's what I needed to do. But the really amazing thing is I started chanting mantras. In one of our yoga classes, I learned about mantras, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I like went back to my room and began chanting, and it just felt good. It was like things were moving. And so that became my personal practice. I got really fascinated. I began like reading books about goddesses and learning all of these different mantras. And like every night before bed, I have a hapa mala, like the chanting beads, and I would do 108 chants to whatever deity I was working with. And after Bali, I came to Mexico City. And I like, my experience in Bali was just so all over the place. Like, it was very transcendental and amazing, but then also like kind of awful, and it just felt like a big mess. And I went into this Google hole where I Googled how to know if you've had a spiritual awakening. And I go into this like black internet hole, and there's this guy in one of the videos, and he has like his dreadlocks, and he's like, well, if you've had a spiritual awakening, you should get a transpersonal psychologist. And I was like, oh, well, I've been in therapy my whole life, but I've never been to a transpersonal psychologist. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, transpersonal psychologists work on both the emotional, physical, and spiritual level. So I found a transpersonal psychologist, and she's an amazing shaman who has trained all over the world. And I had no idea who she was. It was just like I landed in the office of this really spectacular human, just kind of um, by miracle, I would say. And she began saying, like, Amber, you've done a lot of work. Are you sure you need to be taking all of these meds? And I was like, what? No one had ever said to me that it was a possibility to go off my meds. She was like, no, I think you should stop taking your meds. I'm like, what? It was like someone had said to me, hey, tomorrow let's go to the moon. I was like, really? But she kept pushing on this. And I'm so grateful. Like, I do not think that if I had stayed in the United States, there's any way I would have ever gotten off drugs. I think that I would have been medicated for life. Like, I had to leave my country and go to Mexico and have a shaman be like, come on, you can do it, in order to take the leap. And so after some pushing from her, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And at that point in time, I was taking Wellbutrin, which is an antidepressant. I was taking Lamictal, which is a mood stabilizer. And I was taking Klonopin. And I had been taking Klonopin daily for 18 years. It's a benzo, like it's a pretty heavy duty med and known to be highly addictive, known to be really difficult to detox off of. I didn't dare at this point speak to my psychologist or psychiatrist. I was just like, I'm just going to do this under the radar. So I made my own taper plan. And my experience had always been like, doctors would be like, oh, we're going to switch your meds. So just taper over a couple weeks. Like, I'd never had anyone do a taper that was longer than 4 weeks. Like, it was always like 2 to 4 weeks, just taper down slowly and you're off. So I made myself a taper plan that was like 6 weeks long, which it should have been 6 months long. I like, knowing what I know now, or longer. I mean, Klonopin, it can take people to not have horrible side effects and withdrawal from Klonopin. It can take years to detox off of it. But I just didn't know any better. So I like dropped my meds pretty fast. And January of 2018, I like went off all the meds, and it was so intense and awful. I felt terrible. There's like the acute withdrawal that happens immediately because your body, basically when you're taking these meds, it like shuts down your nerve cells so that the neurotransmitters aren't working and moving around correctly. So my nerve cells opened up and like all the neurotransmitters got sucked up. And that's why people have like seizures and stuff when they have really acute withdrawal, because there's an overstimulation. And so I like didn't sleep at all. Like, when I say I didn't sleep, I mean zero sleep for 2 weeks. I was shaking. I was so dizzy. It was dangerous for me to even be walking around the house. I fell down a flight of stairs and hurt my wrist, and just, it was really intense for the first couple weeks. And then it was like, all of the neurotransmitters had been sucked up, and my brain chemistry wasn't working correctly. So I entered what's called the protracted withdrawal phase. And that's when your body's like trying to reestablish itself. But I didn't have neurotransmitters. My brain wasn't functioning. And I fell into this horrible depression. I felt super suicidal. My bones hurt. My muscles hurt. I could barely get out of bed. All my work dried up at the same time, which is just very interesting how life works. I made some mistakes. So like, maybe it was, I just got fired and didn't realize it, but because I was doing client work at the time. But it was intense. I'd say the first like 3-4 months were really, really difficult. And then I started to kind of stabilize a little bit, and like, I launched a marketing company in order to pay my bills, and I like got a co-working and just started showing up there. And for a long time, I would like drag myself out of bed and make it to the co-working, and I might be able to work for an hour or 2 hours, and then I'd have to go back home and rest. And that was the best that I could do. But little by little, I made it through that. And around 9 months, I started feeling pretty decent. Like 6 to 9 months, I started feeling like myself again. And I was like, oh my God, well, I'm fine. And what had happened is all of those years that I had been doing yoga and meditation, and especially chanting, like for me, chanting is an active form of meditation. And so, like every night, I was kneeling down on the ground and chanting these mantras and like praying and spending time communing with the divine. And I had learned how to regulate my nervous system, which I didn't realize that I was doing that. But like when I came out the other side, I was really totally fine and like quite better than I had ever been in my life. I started sleeping for the first time in my life, which was just a miracle. I'd always struggled to sleep. And like now I sleep. It's so delicious. And I felt like I had access to my creativity and who I was, and just a deeper connection on a spiritual level and with friends. And it was like, but I also was upset. Like, you know that movie with Jim Carrey where he is in, what is it? The Truman Show.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like living in this caged world, essentially. He's in
Mm-hmm.
heaven. Like that's how I felt. All of my life, I had been told that I had these incurable mental health diseases, and that I needed medication in order to function. And it was a fucking lie. That was so not true. There was never anything wrong with me. And so I also felt indignant and angry. And after that, I decided to write a book about my life. And so I quit like half of my clients. In 2020, I started writing this book. And I just so happened to move as well. And I was in an empty house, and all I had was like a lounge chair and a couple house plants. Like I didn't even have forks. And I'm like, I'm going to write this book about my life story. I had also joined this year-long shamanism training program. It's like shamanism and transpersonal therapy, which is super interesting. And COVID hits. And so I spent all of COVID. It wasn't just an empty house, it was an empty building. I was the first person to live in an apartment in that building. And it was a disaster. Like everything that could go wrong in a building, it went wrong. Like my gas was going out, my electricity was going out. And like trying to write about my life in isolation. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this for other people. But no, it was a super shadow work, deep dive into my own life, because it's one thing to have this story, and it's another thing to then try and explain it. And I had to like unpack what had happened and how I became the crazy person that I was for all of those years. Like, how did I get there? And I started making all of these connections with my childhood, like with the way that I was raised, and then the way that I later acted out and behaved, and the programming that I had. And it was good. I feel like I finally started pulling apart my programming. And I disassociated and took meds and like ran away from my problems for all of those years, for decades. I kind of had to do something really intense, like writing a book in isolation in order to do the healing work that I needed to do. So that was an intense period. And I eventually decided like I couldn't publish the book yet, because I got like halfway through it. I was like, how can I just write this book? Like what's my end gonna be? I got off meds, and then I spent 9 months torturing myself writing this book for you. The end? Like that's I was like, okay, I have to go live some life and see who I am without all these meds. So I met this guy at a ayahuasca ceremony, actually, and he also chanted mantras, and we began doing these kirtan events together. And it was this very like transcendental, beautiful relationship in some ways. Everything was like in this spiritual realm, but honestly, on a practical level, it wasn't working out very well. And we broke up after a couple months, and I realized I was pregnant. And so I got back together with him, and it was a struggle of a relationship, and I ended up losing the baby right about 3 months. And that was so tragic. Like I had always wanted to be a mother, and I mean, feeling alone and like I was going to be alone the rest of my life was one of the big things that I bemoaned in my deep depressed states. And 3 days after I lost the baby, my partner walked out on me, and it was just like so much loss. But that experience, like it took me a while to process it. I did things so different. Instead of drowning myself in wine. Oh, I didn't mention this, but in 2020 I also stopped drinking completely, like 100% dry. So at this point I hadn't been drinking for, a year and a half or something. And so I like prayed, I cried, I spent time with friends, I sang mantras. I had a group of friends who did a healing ceremony and like laid their hands on my body and sent me healing energy. I did a womb clearing, like these beautiful kind of shamanic, like soul healing activities that I really did everything. I practiced what I now am preaching, about energy work as being so powerful. And that was the event that helped me see that I am really profoundly changed and transformed. Because when life's giving you roses, like it's easy to be like, yes, I'm a luminous yogi who chants mantras. But it's when things really fall apart that you see what you're made of. And I was really amazed to discover, like, I am a totally transformed person. And Amber, my Amber in 2016 would have, I don't know, just totally crumbled. So that was when I was like, okay, I need to talk about all of this stuff. Like, I am ready to share with other people. So last year, I once again quit my marketing work and began the process of launching a company. And so now I have a company called Mental Health Rebels, and I'm talking about mental health, and I'm talking about medication and the fact that that's not a real solution. And what I really believe, um, we have therapy, which is great, but that's all in the mental realm. And then we have these psych meds, and like maybe they can work, maybe they can help in a total crisis, but they don't really solve any of the root problems of mental illness. What I think and feel that we are missing are energetic practices to move energy through our body. And so I talk a lot about energy work, and I just found it all to be so healing for me. And when I say energy work, I'm talking about things like chanting mantras, meditating, yoga, breath work, EFT tapping. Like, mantras for me were the thing that were so healing, but I think there's a lot of different paths that people can come at it from. And I find when I talk to other people, like yourself, for example, that's how other people are really doing the healing work as well. I feel like that's the missing link, and so that's what I want to share with people. So
Mm.
that's my story.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing it. It just, I got goosebumps like multiple times in that story. And I think it is a powerful message because I personally, I haven't followed the path of medication. My mom was like, we don't take drugs. But it was more of like, I feel like just that we have to be strong. We don't talk about our emotions, but we're fine kind of thing. Right. So I never really went to therapy. I never like did any of those things. Even now, I don't really even take Advil or anything, just that was the way I was raised. But, I do understand. And, with you, and it sounds like with your mom, right? It was like her intention was well, right? Like it sounds like that's kind of what she was shown, that what she felt helped her. And so she was trying to do that for you. But there is, I think, especially in our culture, we are so disconnected with our body. And the only thing, like, I was on birth control for 20 years and I recently stopped in February. And it seems like a little thing, but the change and the way I can connect with my body like completely shifted. I'm like
Mhm.
so much more in tune myself, and because of that, it allows me to deepen my spirituality, right? Because now I can actually tune into myself. Like I've been trying to taper off alcohol since 2020. I know it doesn't have a place in my life. I go through, like, last summer I gave it up for 3 months, and then I'm a bartender during the day. So sometimes I have to taste things. And it was like I was starting a new job bartending. So I had to taste all the wines. And then, of course, trying to meet new people, everyone's like, well, let's go for wine. And after like sipping like a glass, combined, I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then just kind of, but I'm back on now, not drinking. And just, it's like, why do I do that to myself? Right. Cause it's like, we use that to not even heal, but I think, I don't know, in hindsight, in some of the relationships I've been in, like say abusive relationships, right? Alcohol, I'm not saying do it, but for me, it helped me sleep, right? It helped me just like kind of numb out from the situation that I was in. No, it wasn't a solution. It really, in the big picture, did not help, but like, I feel like in a sense, it helped me get through the day. At the time, it was, you know what I mean? If that makes any sense. But
What you're saying is actually really important, because one of the things that we get trapped in is feeling bad about ourselves, like, oh my God, I'm such a disaster. I can't
Mm.
believe myself. I just drank another whatever. I did this or that. I think in order to actually make a big change and detox off meds, or decide to quit drinking or deal with any kind of addiction or bad behavior, even if that's overeating, even if it's that you eat too much sugar, it's that we have to recognize that we didn't start doing that for no reason.
Mm.
It's not because I'm an idiot. Like, I wasn't doing those behaviors because there was something wrong with me or I had no self control or whatever. It's because on a subconscious level, we're always trying to take care of ourselves and protect
Mm.
ourselves. So
Yeah.
we develop these bad habits, and I'm putting like air quotes bad habits, because they serve a function and they actually are helping us. And I don't think that we can just cold turkey quit any bad habit. We need to replace it with some sort of, healthier or like upgraded
Mm-hmm.
coping
Mm-hmm.
solution that actually serves the same purpose. And that, in my opinion, is the only way that we can deal with addictions and all of these things. Because I don't think it works to be like, that's it, I'm just never eating sugar again. Because now it's like an exercise in self-will. And
Mm.
that's so good. But if you recognize, well, every time that I'm eating giant slices of cake, it's because I feel super lonely and sad and depressed. Like, okay, so if that's the issue, well, maybe instead of eating cake, you need to call someone.
Mm-hmm.
But there needs to be
Mm-hmm.
some sort of replacement. So, like, what you're saying makes absolute sense, that you, and I mean, there's, everything's fuzzy, right? Like, of course, there's the bad alcohol, or like the destructive alcohol behavior where
Mm-hmm.
you're associating. But then I also think that sometimes it is just a social thing, and it's like what everybody's doing, and you kind of get caught in the loop and whatever, right? Um, and so I think the first step is being kind to yourself and forgiving yourself, and like recognizing that, okay, actually, my system and my subconscious are super smart in taking care of me. How can I fulfill this in a different way that
Mm-hmm.
the goals that I have now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as humans, it's like I think we naturally have addictive tendencies, right? Like we are habitual, right? So it's like we have an emotion attached to a thing, and it's so hard to break that because, like you said, it is our subconscious, which is running like 80% of the show, right? It's like we can't, there's so much that we don't even have control over because it's just like in the background. And I love you with the mantras because, I think people are, mantras, affirmations, and you'll sometimes hear, oh, I can't just like affirm my life into the positive, right? Like people get like frustrated about it or say, but on the same level, yes, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm amazing like 5 times in a row and then all of a sudden be like, all right, that's it, I believe it, I'm amazing. But when you do it every single day, you are rewiring your subconscious to then believe, because it's our thoughts and our actions lined up that create the subconscious, right? So I do believe like mantras and affirmations absolutely work. Maybe not in like a 5-minute chunk and that's it. You have to continue to do it, right, to really convince your subconscious that it's true. And then when you have that you've shifted your subconscious, then you can start taking aligned action because now you truly believe it. And so I do affirmations like every single day. Every single time I notice my mind say something negative, like you can't do that, instead I'm like, how can I do this? How can I make this happen? I am worthy, right? So that eventually there's a time where I'll go to do something, and instead of being like anxious or like, oh my God, I can never do this, be like, all right, we're gonna figure this out. Let's push through and let's do it. Meditate afterwards, like whatever it is. But like having those tools is so, so powerful.
I've definitely stuck sticky notes that say things like, you are worthy, you're a goddess, I love you, all over
Mm-hmm.
my house before. You're beautiful. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
my mantras that I sing are mostly mantras in Sanskrit.
Mm.
So Om Namah Shivaya, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think is really interesting about those is that you can choose the energy that you're working with. Like each of these gods, I'm really fascinated by the mythology that is attached to the mantras and the different gods and goddesses, like Shiva or Krishna or Vishnu or all of these different ones. And they're archetypes. Like throughout all of history, we have told stories, and there's these archetypes that we connect to because they awaken something that's true within us. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a goddess Durga like
Hmm.
flying around in the Himalayas. Maybe, maybe not. But what I do know is that the goddess Durga helps me connect with an aspect of the divine by like putting a face on it. And she's a goddess of strength and courage. She's ferocious. She saves the world from evil demons. I could tell you so many stories. I know. I know all the goddess stories. And she's also, you know, a loving mother. Like she's one of the goddesses I most connect with. And that is within me. Like there's an aspect of the divine that's outside of me that I can call upon for help, but then there's also a part of me that is a warrior goddess that when I do those chants, it wakes that up inside of me. Or there might be another point in my life where I'm trying to remove obstacles and I work with Ganesha's energy. And so every night I'm chanting Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. And like I did that, for example, the way that I normally do it is I'll work in containers. So for like 40 days or 90 days, I will sing the same mantra 108 times every single night. And if I miss a day, then I have to start over. Those are the rules.
Hmm.
So, but like when I worked with Ganesha's energy, it was really transformative. He's known as the remover of obstacles. And he, first, it brought up all the obstacles. Like I had so many problems that came up during that period, was like, oh my gosh, this is a huge issue. Like, how is it possible that I've been ignoring this for all this time? It was stuff I didn't want to look at. And then I was able to resolve everything. It was a pretty transformational time. And what you said about the subconscious is super interesting because when you're chanting these mantras, like you go into a meditative state. And I've chosen a mantra that has a specific vibration. Like they say Sanskrit is the language of the gods. It's a perfect language. It was not created by humans. It was given to us by divine beings. And every single syllable has a vibration that resonates within our souls and within our subconscious. And so you go into a meditative state and you're using this vibration to program your mind. It trains your brain. And that is how we're able to make big changes because our subconscious is like, I mean, it's practically impenetrable. It's very, very difficult to retrain that part of our brains unless we go into these deep meditative states. So I feel like, I mean, I don't feel like I'm somebody who talks a ton about manifestation. I wouldn't say that's really my niche, but I definitely feel like I've been able to change my life in massively positive ways through these practices.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. I've studied Ayurveda and yoga philosophy a little bit, and I have an Om tattoo on the back of my neck, and it was like one of the first tattoos I got, and I was just like I was drawn to it, but I didn't quite understand why. You know, at the time I wasn't like super spiritual. I hadn't studied. But then like as I grew up, I'm like, no wonder, because like now I'm like so connected. And I studied actually I would consider my first spiritual teacher on my journey. He was a pranic healer, Master Stephen Coe. But it was like during the pandemic, you know, obviously he couldn't do any sort of in-person meditations. And then he just chose to do every single day, you know, a twin hearts meditation or healing the world meditation. And so we would sit there and chant, you know, like Om Mani Padme Hum, stuff, you know, things like that. And although like he would do like little lessons before we would meditate and chant. And so I completely resonate. There's just like a feeling, especially like when you are doing a meditation to like bless the world. It's like the amount of love that you feel because it's not about you, but it's healing you in the same time, right? You're channeling that energy and like putting it towards the world and earth. And it's just, yeah, it's so beautiful. I want to go back. Oh, continue.
Oh, good. No, I was just gonna say about Om.
Mm.
Um, Om is the primordial vibration, and
Hmm.
it is a vibration. Like we are energetic beings. Like our hearts literally have a 3 to 5 foot radius where they are vibrating. Like our brain, we have brain waves. Like we go through different waves in order to be like awake and asleep and in deep meditative states. And we are energetic beings, and there is some sort of energy that is powering everything. Like if you think about the basic molecules, we have atoms. And when I was in school, they taught us that an atom was like a nucleus, a proton, and an electron, and it was like
Hmm.
spinning around. And now there's even smaller things. I'm not really a scientist.
Neutrino.
Yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, but we break those apart. But
Yeah.
every time they break the atoms apart even more, what they discover is that it's 99% just energy in motion. And the actual
Hmm.
vowels are like non-existent, and they keep breaking it down more and more and more, and they can't find any real stuff. The truth of the matter is we are just energy in motion, and there is something powering that. Like there's some force field that is beyond our technological understanding, and in my opinion, I call that the Om. It,
Mm,
and that's why when we chant Om and we chant these mantras and we make these sounds and like our bodies plug into these vibrations, it connects with us on such a deep level because we are bringing ourselves into resonance with the all, with the universe, with
mhm.
primordial vibration.
Yeah. And I think like every religion, the beginning of the Bible and everything, right? It's like, and it began with the word, right? And the word is Om. If you are, going through, Hinduism or anything like that, but it's like, no matter what word you want to say, but it is, right? It's so powerful. And it is that energy and that vibration behind it. Before I get on any podcast interview, I meditate for like 3 minutes and then I literally just like hum into the microphone just so that I can like feel it and I'm setting the intention and the container, right? And I just, it just started doing it one day because like when I did it, I like felt my whole body, I had a reaction to it. So now I just like hum until I feel that like feeling. And then, so I get on here like 5 minutes early and I just sit and like hum to myself. But like, but the intention
I
being
love
is
that.
that,
I love
yeah, it's
that
just
so
setting the
much.
container. So it is really, really powerful. And not only that, like our words are so powerful. And I've been, it's interesting when like just divine synchronicities, right? Like something comes into your like consciousness and then something else is sent and something else is sent. But it's like I've just been really paying attention to words and what they mean and how we're using them, right? Like even there's a podcast that's called Good Rising. And just because morning, right? Like good morning, just like we're morning, like you know what I mean? So it's just so
Oh,
right.
gosh,
It
I've
was
never thought about that.
yeah, because we just say it like good morning, but it's like, what are you mourning? Right. So it's like you choosing our words differently because our words are very, very powerful. The
Yeah.
vibration of them, the intention behind them. I mean, I would have to like Google it, but there are so many words that we use in our everyday that is very actually negative, right? That like holds like a really negative connotation. And we just don't think about it because that's just what we are used to doing. So it's really interesting. And yeah, and using those words like Sanskrit words, right? And you can feel the difference between that and just like saying it in English. It's really powerful.
I am a language learner, so I live in
Mhm.
Mexico and I actually have a degree in Spanish and I've been living in Spanish speaking countries now for 7 years if we
Mm.
count all the places I've lived. And my Spanish is pretty good. Yay! It's such a big project. But it's amazing to me how things shift. Like there's ways that you say things in Spanish that are so different than the way that you say things in English. And
Mhm.
it helped me be more conscientious of
Yeah.
the words that I use and choose, and even just the programming. Like when you learn a language, you kind of have more choice because it's like I'm the me I am. But I actually think with your native language, it's more programmed. Like I hear myself saying things that are just deeply ingrained in English. And
Mhm.
then in Spanish, I feel like I'm a little bit more freeform and like conscientious even because
Mhm.
I've chosen my words more carefully. So
Yeah.
I
That's
definitely
really
think,
interesting. So my dad's from Montreal. I spent like 3 or 4 years in Montreal when I was little. So I learned to read and write French before English. And then we moved to the States and I had to go to remedial English classes. And so they told my dad, like, you have to stop speaking to her in French because she doesn't understand English. And so I've literally like, I haven't lost it. It's in my mind somewhere, but because I wasn't speaking it daily, like I didn't really I can't carry a conversation, but I can understand a good chunk of French. And I took French through all through like high school, and then I went to college in Spain. So I was like learning Spanish, but a lot of my friends were Moroccan, and so they spoke French. And so like just being in that, I picked up some Spanish, just picked up some French. But to your point, it's really interesting when I watch something in French or in Spanish and I understand the base of the words, and then I look at the subtitles. I'm like, that's not really what it means. But there's no like actual translation to like the actual English words. And I just think like, yeah, foreign languages, there's just so much more. Not that English is not beautiful because it is in its own right. Like, absolutely. I think there are absolutely beautiful English words. I don't know. I feel like maybe there's more intention behind like the phrases, right? In a foreign language or just it doesn't necessarily translate. And so like the way we look at it and pick it up is a little bit different, but
yeah.
yeah. But I want to go back sort of to like the beginning of your story. Because it's, what we learn, in our first 7 years, 8 years is so powerful in just what we believe. Right. And that's what, as you were talking, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like, you were just told this from this age and there was no questioning of it, right? Like you just took it on as an absolute truth. And yeah, so like there was no path to healing because that's not what you were taught. That's not what you were told. My daughter's 12, which is interesting. I could talk about that, but I didn't really come into my spirituality until she was about 7, or I would say like 7, probably about that age. And, I had divorced her father. I had gotten into an abusive relationship, divorced him. It was a whole thing. So I know she's taken on a lot of conditioning from who I was at that point. Of course, I did the best that I could with what I had, but I also didn't want her to really see and witness what I was going through. So I sent her to her room a lot. And I feel, now trying to heal this, I can see. But, like with my son, I feel like because he was 1 when I started healing, really, really doing my healing. So I always like urge him with everything. I'm like, ask questions, get curious, right? Don't take like what everybody says to be an absolute truth. Like in school last year in kindergarten, they would tell me like, he asked too many questions. He's too inquisitive. Like, and I'm like, isn't that the point of school? Like, but they're like, he's respectful. He's never disrespectful to the teacher. But I'm just like, and so he comes home and the teacher would like talk to me and I'm just like, listen, bud, like ask questions. Don't let anybody tell you that you're supposed to sit there and not ask or not argue. What's the word I'm looking for? Just like be curious, right? Not everything is the truth. But that was a complete side note. But as you were telling your story, that's kind of what, it is so powerful the way that we speak to kids, right? And it is, and also on the flip side, I believe that, as parents, when I look at my daughter and how she was raised, I did the best that I could with what I had at the time. And it wasn't a lot. You know what I mean? She knows I love her. Like, absolutely, she knows I love her. But I see her now at 12 and things like that, where she'll go a whole day. She won't eat breakfast. She won't eat lunch at school. And she comes home and then she'll have ice cream. And she's like, Mom, is this going to make me fat? And I'm like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm just trying to work with her on that, where it's like, let's eat healthier things. Let's make healthier choices, because when you can tap into your body, like you experience this, like getting off of all that stuff, you're able to actually fully embody, right? Who you are and feel that. So I guess my question there is, how was that? I mean, from your explanation, I know how that progressed, but, I don't know. I lost my question. I kind of went off on a tangent, but
Well,
yeah.
I have so much compassion for your daughter. It's hard being like 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
We start awakening and like becoming ourselves, and we're so confused and all these hormones and just it's such a difficult time. I like want to send her an energetic hug.
Yeah.
And I think that it is a time where we're trying to establish ourselves and discover who we are. And unfortunately, one of the things that happened when I look back at my childhood, it's taken me so long to understand this. My mom, because she had had such a terrible upbringing herself, and she herself had struggled with all of these mental health issues, she kind of gave up on herself. She was just like, I'm a lost cause. I don't want to deal with my own self. And she was young. My mom was 25 when she had me. She's like, I don't want to deal with my own self. I'm just going to dedicate my entire life to raising my children different. Like, I'm going to have the perfect children, and that will be my life's work, and that's good. And so when I was born, in my mom basically, her whole life purpose was that I be perfect.
Mm.
And that was a huge weight for a child to carry around on her shoulders. Like, and to this day, my mom doesn't have much of a sense of herself. Like, if you ask her, how are you? She'll be like, oh, well, your sister, blah, 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 and your nephew. Like, she doesn't have anything that's hers. She has lived her entire life vicariously through her children, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
But that meant that she needed me to be what she wanted. Like, if I wasn't behaving the way that she needed, like, it would cause her to fall into these kind of psychotic episodes. And like when I tried to act out and say, this isn't okay, and stopped eating, well, then that threw my mom into a gigantic depressive episode. And she was the one having the meltdown in my closet, right? Like
Mm.
it wasn't about me ever. Like I was basically the channel for my mom working out her issues. And
Yeah, it
so
was like you were responsible for her emotions and her mental health.
Mhm. And so it's taken me a very long time to like know who I am. And I think part of what I had to break down was that it's okay for me to be Amber. Like,
Mm.
because I grew up in this uh, I try to use a Spanish word, ambiance,
Mhm.
this atmosphere where I was always, trying to be what other people wanted me to be. And so when I would be in relationships, I was just trying to morph into whatever I thought the dude wanted me to be. Or,
Mm.
if I was with friends, and so I would end up with these like very controlling big personalities who didn't see me. And then I had this wound of like, no one sees me. And that was true as a child too. Like my parents didn't actually see Amber. I was their perfect daughter. I wasn't my own being. And I mean, it is kind of sad. Like I haven't been able to maintain a healthy, happy relationship with my parents now. Like I moved to another country. I just don't see them very often. And like we chat here and there and every now and then I go back to visit. But like the last few times since I've gone through my healing that I've gone back to visit my parents, it's like I have a trauma response. I like my body shuts down and I get really sick and I just feel like I'm swimming through mud. I like can't even function. And so it is sad that I can't have a better relationship with them. And am hopeful that like, I'm still on my journey. I'm in this place where I'm feeling significantly better and offering like love and support and trying to start talking about the things that I've learned and share. But I'm still growing myself. And so I hope that at some point in time I can have a more positive relationship with them. But it's it's really fascinating. And I feel like every time something big happens and I get really triggered, I'm learning to go back to my childhood. Like I recently went through a heartbreak. I had a man who did not treat me very well. And it was it really hit me hard. And as I went back, I was like, well, of course, I keep picking these men who don't actually like me. And I have to like beg and plead for their approval and affection because that's how I was shown love when I was a little girl. I was always in trouble. I was always begging and pleading my case, trying to like just the most minor things. Can I wear shorts today? Like my parents, I couldn't even wear what I wanted to wear. I wasn't allowed to paint my fingernails any color except for pink. Like, so I feel like as I continue to grow, it's like okay, little by little, I'm working to deprogram these things, but they're deep.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I know I had posted, I had interviewed somebody on insecure attachment styles, and you had commented that you were fearful avoidant. And I think I'm the same. And Sarah, who I was interviewing, is also a fearful avoidant. And just knowing that, understanding like how that presents itself in my life was so powerful, was such like just having that awareness, right? To like kind of sit back and be like, okay, this is what's happening, right? Like I can come back to here because I resonate so much with that, with people pleasing and having to be, what others wanted me to be, and then yeah, being like, oh well, nobody sees me, but it's like I'm not even showing myself.
Yeah.
So, as I've my personal journey recently, as I'm dating, I'm just like I'm just it's hard, but it's also like once I do it, it's so much more empowering. Just like if there's any red flags or if there's something that just in my body doesn't feel right, I'm just like I'm cutting it off because it's like I know myself and I could go another year, 2, 3 years in this situation, but it's not me. And my body is like full on telling me now because when I look back at my abusive relationships, absolutely, I knew like straight away that it was not, but that person was showing me love in a way that made sense to me because that's what I was shown as a child.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's absolutely.
When I was a kid, like love looked like chaos and drama. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so one day, like things would be, I was the perfect child and we were like going camping and having a great time and playing in the woods. And then the next day I was getting spanked,
Mm,
I got spanked a lot when I was a little girl.
yeah.
And I, I feel like that really sets you up for abusive relationships, because especially with alcoholics and addicts, because those are the most unpredictable people on the planet, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that felt like love to me, like it
Mm-hmm.
being total chaos and not knowing what was going to happen, having to beg and plead for forgiveness all the time and always being in trouble, like that is super comfortable for me. And it's so interesting, this, I recently had an experience where I mentioned I got my heart broken, and like just the day before he and I started a thing, there was this very nice man who I met who really liked me, and he was like calling me every day and sending me messages and like, you're so lovely, Amber. And I could not get excited about that guy. I just
Mm-hmm.
was not attracted to him, and it was so interesting to me. And I was really into this other guy who acted like I didn't matter and didn't call me back and like was,
Activated your nervous system, which felt
oh
comfortable.
my gosh. So I don't know how to totally fix this, right?
Yeah.
Because here I am, I'm in it, sister.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'm
think
like,
with
I want
time,
to like that. How do I get there?
yeah, I think with time and practice and trusting yourself, because I've definitely, I resonate so strongly with that. Like there is somebody that I am like currently dating that is attractive, is so kind. It's just like everything like is respectful, where I'll be like, I'll voice something where in the other people would either gaslight me or like turn it back or ignore me, but this person is just kind of like, okay, like, how do you want to proceed? Like an actual like conversation. But same thing, I don't feel my nervous system activated. So I'm like, is this like, am I not attracted? Like, he's an attractive guy, but it's interesting. I'm noticing these things and I'm pushing through it because it's like I made a list, right? And there's so many things like respect, honesty, communication, kindness, all of these things are in this person. But because my whole system isn't like in chaos, I'm just kind of like, like it's interesting. It really is, because that is, it's like it doesn't feel good, but it feels comfortable, right? And I think I got to the point, I dated somebody for like 2 years that just would not was is a I still have this person in my life and he's a good person, but for whatever reasons, when we talk about insecure attachment styles, I'm fearful avoidant, 100% believe he's dismissive avoidant. So for me, it's like I turn into the anxious side, and then he pushes away. But I did this for 2 years because my nervous system was continually activated, right? Fortunately, this
Mm,
person wasn't abusive, which I believe was my literally, and I've said this when I was talking to Sarah, but it's like this person was sent to me to help me heal. Even though it felt chaotic and even though it felt painful, it was healthy in the sense where there was no manipulation, there was no abuse, there was no that side of things. There was just, and not even disinterest, but that he had his own issues, right? So I do
mm,
believe like as you continue to work through it, as you start noticing those signs, as you start like, for me, it's like if I feel that nervous system activation, if I feel that like, oh my gosh, I have to like text this person right now and understand like why they're not, like why did they take too long or to respond, or things like that get us all like crazy in our head. And then we're just like, our whole system's put off. I will literally like, I'll tap, I'll go in meditation and just
mhm,
kind of like come back to myself and remind myself like, like I am worthy. Whoever is meant to be in my life is out there looking for me too, right? Like this is not the end all be all. This person does not have all the qualities I'm looking for. And I too think the other person, the one that I dated for a couple years that I was just like crazy over, I also tell myself, I'm like, if I could get over him, I can get over anybody, because like, so it's just like little things, right? Like I truly do believe like as you continue just connecting and working through it, like you will get there, and it every person, and it's not to say that you have to go through 10 more guys to find the one, right? But like I do believe it does get easier, and you do notice like the healthy things that almost repel you, right?
mhm.
Start to notice like, oh, that's actually the way it's supposed to be, like I don't have to be like so, you know activated about it or disinterested. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think I'm making progress. Like the last relationship I was in was not abusive. I mean, it wasn't a perfect relationship
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't work out, but it was a healing relationship, and he
Yes.
was a really lovely, sweet person. And now at least I see it. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to, and like the relationship that just fell apart, it fell apart fast. Like I saw the problems and it exploded. And
Yeah.
I'm glad. I'm like, it didn't turn into a lengthy drawn out affair like you were mentioning. It was
Mm.
like something that crashed and burned
Yeah.
quickly. So I definitely think that little baby steps, and
Yeah.
seeing it and being aware of our own dysfunction is like a huge step. And putting it out there and creating and vocalizing the desire to be in a healthy relationship with a healthy person, like you making a list like that, I think that that is so powerful, because now there's that intention and you're able to cross check your intention with, regardless of what your nervous system is doing, like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
here's my list. Like, does this check out with what I have declared I am going to call in? And if it's not aligning, and if it's like hitting the red flags,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take care of myself and protect myself, because we have to create trust in our own selves, especially for someone who is a disorganized attachment style kind of person, right? Like, I need to be able to trust my own self that at the very least, Amber, I have my own back. And
Mm-hmm.
if there's a problem, I'm going to end things and protect myself. So little by little, poco poco.
Yeah. Yep. And that's all we can do. It's just like day by day, moment by moment, learning the tools to like be present in this moment and not so much worry about, what's coming or what's happened, and just kind of like that practicing non-attachment. Right. And yeah, that's what I do with the list and things like that. Like I had a moment after I like first was intimate with this person where I felt like I was just like, then I started feeling that like creep of it, but I was just like, nothing's changed, right? Like, because I think sometimes like there's behaviors that change or things, and I realized I was creating my own drama, but I was just like, it's fine. What I mean? Just coming back to myself and remembering like, all of those things. Um, but yeah, I'm trying.
I also really love that you mentioned using EFT tapping. I
Mm,
personally think, like, I group energy work into two categories. Basically, the two ways that you can use it. Like, there's the daily practice, which I feel like is absolutely essential to be able to be training our brains. So having something that you do every single day, or like close to every day. I mean, we don't have to be Nazis here, and not if you miss a day, it is okay. But things that you do as regularly as possible, like meditation. And I feel like meditation, doing mantras, breath work, yoga are all really good for that. But then there's also the crisis coping techniques, like when something happens and now you're totally activated and freaking out, what do you do? And
mm.
EFT tapping is one of my favorite go-to's. I can't tell you how many times I've like snuck out of a room and gone to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the toilet and been like, okay, I am feeling like I'm going to explode. It is okay. Love, accept, respect, and forgive myself. And Amber, I've got your back.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
that kind of dialogue is really powerful. I also think breathwork is the other one that
Mm.
is really helpful. Whether it's doing some sort of fancy breath work like alternate nostril breathing, or box breathing or something like that, or
Mm-hmm.
just taking a deep breath. I think
Yeah.
everyone knows that if you take a deep breath, you'll feel better. But it's hard to get there sometimes. Like when I am really activated and I'm upset, sometimes I'm successful and sometimes not. And then that's part of the journey as well, right? Like sometimes I get so upset that I can't calm myself down and I can't sit down and I can't go hide in the bathroom. But then little by little, more and more, I do choose to calm myself down in a productive way. And so I think that's really the journey, the healing journey is like, okay, I have all of these tools now. And we have to fall down and pick ourselves back up over and over and over again. Like, I can't tell you how many times over the years I've slipped back into old bad behaviors, or, and I hate using the word bad, but old dysfunctional, disruptive, harmful behaviors, and then been like, okay, well, I drank yesterday, or I did this, or I screamed at someone, or I, fled the party without saying goodbye. And that's okay. Amber, I deeply love, accept, respect, and forgive you. And we're just going to do tomorrow. Like, I've got today, I've got right now. Doesn't matter what happened yesterday. Like, I can pick myself up from here. Um, and I'm still doing that. But, like, the percentage is getting better. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there are more and more times now where I'm able to put into practice these energy work techniques and help myself out. And then on those days where I do fail, I feel like energy work is so helpful as well, because now I'm trying to pick myself up off the ground and get back on track. And having these like daily practices where I can go to a yoga class and I'm like, okay, I'm going to just really practice self-care today. I'm going to go to yoga, I'm going to do breath work, I'm going to write in my diary and my journal and try and hash out what happened here. Like, it helps me calm down and realign and like just get back um into the state that and the vibration that I want to be living in and that I'm choosing to be living in. And so I don't know, these techniques are really powerful. They give us so much choice. Like, I get to, instead of being a victim of my own crazy, which was the way I felt for years and years, I now get to choose my state every day. And I do have control. Like, I do get to pick if I'm a hot mess or if I am a centered, aligned,
Mhm.
calm
Yeah,
yogini.
absolutely. And like you said earlier, it's doing these practices not only when we're at a rock bottom, but every single day, because it's
Mhm.
like we hit those lows and we drop to our knees and we pray to God to like help us. And he does, she does, source does, universe does, whatever terminology you want to use, right? But it's like, why do we not think that just like on a regular happy day, if we send up a prayer or like have gratitude or put these practices into place, like EFT, meditation, like all these things, why we wouldn't be responded to, right? Because it's the big things and the little things. And I think it also gives us the tools that when we do hit that rock bottom, when we do feel emotionally activated and all those things, then it's just quicker that we can come to these practices and move through it, right? And it's not avoidance of the issue. I think it allows us to allow it to come up in a way that it never did before, because now we have confidence that we can process it in a healthy way and it's not going to cripple us for days, or we're not going to be feel fearful of what that anger feels like or what that sadness feels like, right? It's like we can feel it in its entirety, but then know that we can also come back to this place of like alignment.
100%. What you just said is so important, that we're not running from our feelings. Like, these practices are not just, oh, we're going to raise our vibration and
Mm-hmm.
everything's super happy, good vibes only. Like, that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I actually think one of the biggest causes of mental health illness, especially like depression and anxiety, is running away from ourselves, running away from our feelings, trying to pretend that everything's okay when it's not. That for me was a huge thing. I was just not living an aligned life. I was not listening to my own self. I was not living in coherence and congruence with who I am. And getting to the place that I am now has meant I have laid on the floor weeping. Like, I've had to get really angry and fall apart and cry. Like, my panic attacks, I suffered from hyperventilating panic attacks for years and years and years. I mentioned earlier that I did this shamanic training program. The first time that I breathed through a panic attack was actually at that yoga retreat that I mentioned, where I started having really bad ones. And one morning I like left the yoga shala and I was just like, couldn't breathe. And one of the teachers sat with me and she was like, you can do this, just breathe with me. And it was the first time that, instead of taking, a bunch of Klonopin to try and calm myself down and zone out, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I sat and I breathed with her, and eventually it did pass. And I was pretty rattled and shaken up, but it was really like brand new wow information for me. Like, oh my God, this is possible. It is possible for me to get through a panic attack without it being this bad. And from that point on, I started trying to breathe through panic attacks. And it didn't happen, just like I was talking about, like, not every time was I successful, but slowly the balance began to tip. Like, I was able to get, breathe myself off the ledge in more of them and take meds in less of them. And like, poco poco, eventually
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't having them very often. And then I went through that shamanic program, and we worked with intentional cathartic states quite a few times, where we went into like a state where we were like screaming and kind of moving energy through our body on a very, very physical level, which I think a lot of people would call like somatic movement or somatic work. And there's, I think, in the United States, there's different ways that that's called, but it's something that I see come up quite a bit. Like, sometimes we need to yell and scream and, kind of fight it out, and it's good for our bodies, like, to be able to pull on someone. And so I went into this as part of a contained exercise, I went into this cathartic state and I started hyperventilating. And I had someone that was like there with me, who was like holding me as I was hyperventilating. And instead of trying to stop it, like for the first time in my entire life, I was like, I'm going to just go all in. I am going to fully feel this. And that day, like, he literally braced his feet against mine, and I braced my hands against his, and I pulled with all of my might, and I screamed until I didn't have a voice. And like, after that day, I lost my voice for days. It was
Mm.
really a transformative experience for me. But that was the last time that I had a panic attack. Like,
Mm.
I needed to, like,
Get
I
it
had been
out.
yeah, like I had been calming myself down, kind of, but it was like I still just needed to get out that last
Mm.
bit. And even now, like, I will feel myself sometimes. I was in a Temazcal just last weekend, and it was really, really hot, and like the air was so thick that you could just chew on it. And I started to be like, can't breathe, you know.
Mm.
And do you ever do butterfly breath where you like put
Hmm. I did EMDR therapy for a couple years, and so that was one of the techniques that when I would travel or get on a plane, they taught me. Yeah.
yeah, so I started doing
Mm.
that in this college and breathing. And I was like, I'm okay. And
Mm.
I was okay. It was just
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
But I do think that sometimes we need to like really get it out. We have to feel these things.
Hmm.
They don't just disappear.
Yeah.
And like in miscarriage, for example, I had to cry and weep and be deeply sad. Like I spent a couple months being really sad. But because I did that, it's not stuck in me now. Like I'm able to talk about that and be fine
Hmm.
because I felt it fully.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially with that, as women, we're just taught that, move on, or there's not, I feel like it's not talked about that much. Right. And yeah. And I think, especially with the panic attacks, right. You had spent like years having the Klonopin be the thing that like calms you down or stops it, like you said, right. And to fully be able to express that is why you stopped having them. Right. I mean, that was, yeah, it's so powerful. Do you know your human design?
I am a manifesting generator.
Manifesting generator. Do you know what your profile is? Like there's a number, like a six, like a 1, 3, or I feel like you have a third line in there somewhere, but that's my question. Why ask?
Cross of the I just know that I'm universal love
Okay.
is my cross, like that one,
Mm-hmm.
which I really love because I feel like singing mantras makes me feel like I am universal love.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that.
um,
Yeah.
I think it's 1-3, but I can't
Okay.
promise you that's
It
correct. I would have to grab my chart. I think I've got it actually. Um, but I think human design is really fascinating, and I'm really, really fascinated by astrology. I
mm,
really connect to all of that. Okay,
mm.
I got it here. Okay, so yeah, I'm a 1-3.
1, 3. Okay. I knew there was a third line because that third line is it is very chaotic in the first 30 years of your life. I'm a 6, 3. So I went through my first 30 years as a 3, 3, which is like complete chaos, right? It's failure, it's trial and error, it's bonds made and broken. And it is like that third line can be like, I know as like a 6, 3 specifically, it's like there is a lot of like addiction patterns in there because you're just trialing and erroring everything, right? So it's like, and for you having that third line as unconscious, it's like your body is just going through this failure and this trial and error and this just like this chaos. And so you, as you were describing your 20s, you had used that word a couple times, and I was like, she's got to have a third line. She's got to have like a 3 in her profile somewhere because I like resonate so strongly to that. It's like, but as far as astrology too, do you know your sun, moon, rising?
So I'm a Pisces sun, a Virgo rising. Today is the Pisces full moon.
Yes, it is in Virgo. Yeah.
Today I'm like, woo!
Yep. Yep.
I've definitely felt a little dreamy. And then I've got a Gemini moon. So I'm three mutable
Mm,
signs, which is
yeah.
kind of chaotic. And Gemini, especially a Gemini moon, is very indicative of mental health
Mm,
and kind of crazy.
yeah.
So
My son has a Gemini moon. And so I noticed like with him, he'll like 1 minute be like, hitting things and being mad. The next minute he's just like wants a cuddle and just very inquisitive and curious. And yeah, there's a lot. And Gemini moons have a hard time like actually processing their emotions, right? Because it is you view it on like an analytical level where it's like I see it, but I don't actually want to feel it, right? I want to like mentally make it make sense, but I don't want to like process through what's going on. And so like with him, I see that happening. And so I just urge him, you know, and anyone with the Gemini moon, right? It's like allowing yourself to go there, but also like understanding who you are and having compassion for that. Because, you know, I think all of these tools, that's why, you know, trying all these different tools and finding what works for you, because tapping may work for me and it may work for you, but there may be somebody listening that has tried tapping over and over and it's just not working for them, right? Well, then move on and find another tool that does work for you. And I think, you know, it goes with those, that human design, astrology, right? It's all tools to support you. But I just think it's so beautiful in how it really presents in our life. But yeah.
And there's
Love
so
that.
many other things like dancing, any kind of
Mm-hmm.
movement for your body is amazing. Also, art. One of the most amazing things that I think that we can do with our darkness and our sadness and our pain is to make art out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like my brand that I'm creating for Mental Health Rebels, I create these really funky collages, but I've always made collages. I find collage art to be really healing and exciting, and like pulling together different images that represent my emotions and the sentiment that I'm trying to express. I find that to be healing. I think writing is really healing.
Mm-hmm.
Singing, using your voice. I mean, our throat chakra is so powerful. That's where we manifest from,
Yeah.
and call things in and say no to things. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
anything using your voice. So I agree with you. There's no one, this isn't like one solution. Just because I like mantras doesn't mean that that's what's going to connect with other people. And
Mm-hmm.
when I work with people, that's really important to me, like figuring out the kind of energy work that works for them, for both the daily practice and for crisis coping techniques. And I even think men and women, like chanting mantras is a really active, kind of feminine form of meditation, whereas
Mm-hmm.
just straight, like clearing your mind kind of meditation, that's a much more masculine focused practice.
Yeah.
And so I would even recommend different things based on whether or not I was working with a man versus a woman.
Mm. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, and I do. I used to sit in meditation in that very like structured masculine way, and when I started switching it up and just incorporating more like feminine aspects to it, and I have, I feel like I've lived my life in a very masculine way, as we're so much taught, right? And then
Mhm.
just allowing that like soft feminine energy to come in has been, it's been incredible. Like it was really awkward at first because I was like, I'm not feminine like that. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like I don't wear dresses and whatever. And like as I'm just kind of like leaning into that, like now like wearing, going out in a sundress, like it just makes me feel good, and it just, right, and it just like allows you to like kind of embody that energy. So yeah, finding things that balance out, and like maybe you have one, like my workouts, you had mentioned working out earlier. I feel like my workouts are very masculine, right? I run, I lift weights, I do all these things, and then incorporating some gentle movement. Like I used to do a lot more yoga. I don't right now. I need to get back to it because I just feel like I don't have to necessarily get like a workout in yoga, but it's still like so impactful on your body. So yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
What would you tell your 12-year-old self?
Hmm. Gosh, I would tell her that she's just not broken. There's nothing wrong with her. That you you are perfect and precious as you are. Mhm. I
That's
don't think she would have believed me though. Sad but true. I think
yeah.
um, it's hard to think about stuff like that, because if I could go back and talk to my 12-year-old self and she did something different, then maybe my story would be different and I wouldn't be
Mhm.
here, this woman, talking to you right now. And despite the fact that my life it's been painful to get to be the Amber I am today, it's been my journey. Like, I wouldn't have the medicine to offer other people that I now have if I didn't go through all of that. Like, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to talk to people about mental health meds if I hadn't had so many failed, frustrating experiences and experiments my own self. And even with my parents, like, one of the most healing things for me has been to just realize, my soul picked those people because they have the exact lessons that I needed to learn in this lifetime. Like, I, my destiny, part of what I came to this earth, this planet, what I came to do in this lifetime was to live through all that suffering. And so I needed those people to help me do it. Um, and so even though it's messy and it's difficult, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it is supposed to be, and that's how it happened. And I accept it and I embrace it and I'm grateful for it. So I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe I would just like go back in time and like wrap my arms around my 12-year-old self and hold
Mm.
her and be like, no matter what, you're gonna come out the other side, baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And, people like you and energy workers that have gone through these things and you can tell listening to your story, there were points in your story that were divinely led, whether you realize it at the time or not, right? That have gotten you through. And I absolutely believe that. I think that all the time. I'm like, I chose this life to have these lessons, to be able to come here now, and be able to help change the world, because you have to go through the
Mm-hmm.
darkness to come out on the other side and help and guide and inspire others. So I thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing your story. And yeah, just your energy and your wisdom and everything. It's been a beautiful conversation. And if you want to let the listeners know where they can find you and how they can work with you, I'll link it all in the show notes. But yeah, if you just want to let them know.
Amazing. So I have a company called Mental Health Rebels, and you can go to mentalhealthrebels.com. I offer free consultations for coaching. Currently, I have an offer to do one-on-one coaching. And then I also have a Instagram account, Mental Health Rebels, at Mental Health Rebels. That's also my Facebook. And I think my Twitter is MH-Rebels. And so, yeah, find me on social media. Follow me, talk to me. I love hearing from humans. And I would love to work with any of you if you're interested.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Of course.